The air in the dining room felt colder than usual. The thermostat was set to the same 72 degrees it always was. But Claire could feel the chill crawling up the skin of her bare arms. It was an icy premonition that had nothing to do with the temperature. Across the sturdy mahogany table, her husband Alex was paying more attention to the glowing screen of his smartphone than to the homemade beef stew he usually loved. The faint smile playing at the corner of his lips certainly wasn't for Claire. That smile belonged to another world, hidden behind the illuminated glass in his hands. Claire set her spoon down, carefully, trying not to make any noise that might interrupt her husband's enjoyment. For the past 6 months, this scene had become her daily reality. Alex would come home from his corporate job, drop his briefcase, take a shower, and then cling to his phone like it was his life support. Their conversations had become brief and functional, limited to questions about whether they had eaten or what errands were pending for the next day. "Honey, how was your afternoon meeting?" Claire asked. Her voice cracked a little more than she would have liked. She just wanted to tear down the invisible wall rising between them. Alex lifted his head, his eyes taking a second to focus on her, like someone just returning from a distant trip. "It was fine, same as always," he replied curtly, before his thumb could resume its agile dance across the screen. Claire took a deep breath. She was a woman who had built her own success from scratch. Her fashion boutique, Claire's Collection, now had 3 thriving locations across New York City, and her investment portfolio, carefully managed by herself, had grown into a source of wealth that far exceeded Alex's middle management salary. She was used to analyzing problems, finding solutions, and acting decisively, but in her marriage, she felt powerless. She knew something was wrong, but kept hoping it was just a passing phase, a temporary boredom that would soon fade. That night, her hope was shattered. After their silent dinner, Alex didn't head straight to his home office as usual. He followed Claire into the living room and sat on the sofa across from her, placing his phone face down on the coffee table. That simple act felt so formal, so heavy, that Claire's stomach churned. "Claire, I need to tell you something," Alex began. His voice carried a flat, emotionless tone, like a doctor about to deliver a bad diagnosis. Claire simply nodded, her heart beginning to pound against her ribs. She clasped her hands together. They suddenly felt cold and clammy. "I think our marriage is over," Alex continued, his eyes fixed on the wall behind Claire, avoiding direct eye contact. "I've thought about this a lot, very carefully. Let's get a divorce." The word divorce hung in the air, sharp and lethal. Claire's world seemed to stop. The ticking of the grandfather clock, which was normally soothing noise, now sounded like the strikes of a giant gavel. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Her throat had closed up entirely. Alex took his wife's silence as a sign of resignation. He continued his explanation with the same cold detachment. "It's not your fault. Claire, you've been a good wife, but I can't lie to myself anymore. I'm still in love with Mia." That name, Mia, the ex-girlfriend Alex, had broken up with 8 years ago, long before he ever met Claire. The name he occasionally dropped in nostalgic stories. The name that had always made Claire feel like an understudy in the movie of her husband's life. "I reconnected with her a few months ago," Alex confessed, devoid of guilt, "and we realized we never should have broken up. I want to start over." Claire finally found her voice, though it only came out as a hoarse whisper. "Start over." "Yes," Alex nodded, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "To do that, we need to resolve our affairs as quickly and fairly as possible. Let's just split the assets right down the middle. That will be the fastest way. This house, the savings, the investments, that's fair, right? Fair." That question was like a second slap, more painful than the request for a divorce. Fair. The mortgage on this house was paid off entirely with the annual bonuses from Claire's business. The vast majority of their savings and almost all the investments came from the profits of her boutiques and her savvy in the stock market. Alex's salary was enough to cover daily expenses. groceries, and his car payments. Nothing more. But in Alex's eyes, it was all our wealth. It was the fruit of labor from which he was ready to harvest half, all to fund a new life with another woman. Claire didn't respond. She just stared at her husband, the man who had slept beside her for 7 years, the man whose career she had supported, the man she had loved unconditionally. Right now, he looked like a stranger negotiating a corporate buyout rather than a man ending a marriage. Claire couldn't sleep that night. At 2:00 a.m., she slipped out of bed. She was thirsty and walked slowly toward the kitchen for a glass of water. As she passed Alex's home office, where the door was left slightly ajar, she heard his voice. It was no longer flat or cold. It was full of warmth and laughter. Just hold on a little longer, baby. It'll be over soon. Alex was saying to someone on the other end of the phone. The process will be fast. I already told her. There was a brief silence. Claire held her breath and leaned her ear close to the crack in the door. How did she react? She was in shock, obviously, but she's weak. She always has been. Alex's laughter echoed again, light and carefree. She won't make things difficult. Claire is too obsessed with me. She'll sign whatever paper I put in front of her. Don't worry, my love. All of her assets, our assets, will be the seed money for our new life. You can quit your job and we'll travel the world just like we always dreamed. Our assets, our new palace, our assets, our new palace. Those words struck Claire like a lightning bolt. The burning pain in her chest instantly transformed into a glacial cold. The tears that had been threatening to spill over seemed to dry up in a fraction of a second. She stepped away from the door slowly. Her hands were clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. She returned to the master bedroom, but didn't get back into bed. She stood in front of the full-length mirror in the corner of the room, observing her reflection. A woman with swollen eyes and a pale face. A woman who had just been called weak. A woman deemed a fool. But what she saw looking back at her in the mirror was no longer weakness. What she saw was the spark of a flame that had just ignited a cold. Highly concentrated, lethal flame. Her grief had metamorphosed into something else. Something unbreakable. Determination. Alex was dead wrong. This war would indeed be quick, but not in the way he imagined. Claire wouldn't make things difficult in court because there would be absolutely nothing left for him to fight over by the time they got there. She would take back every dollar, every share of stock, every brick she had built with her sweat and tears. In the silence of that New York night, Claire swore an oath to herself. Alex could take his past with him, but she was going to reclaim her entire future. The next morning, the sun rose over the city as usual, but Claire's world had fundamentally shifted when she went downstairs for breakfast. Alex was already sitting at the kitchen island sipping coffee and scrolling through the news on his iPad. He looked up when Claire walked in, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Claire didn't look like a woman whose world had just collapsed. She was showered, wearing an impeccable navy blue silk blouse, her hair pulled back into a sleek, elegant bun. There was no trace of tears on her face, only an almost unnatural calm. "Good morning," Claire greeted him. Claire's throat, her voice was steady and even. She took a slice of sourdough bread and calmly spread jam on it, her movements unhurried. "Good morning," Alex replied. Shifting uncomfortably, he watched her, trying to read her expression. "Are you okay?" "I'll be fine," Claire answered, looking Alex dead in the eye without blinking. "I thought about what you said last night, and you're right. There's no point in clinging to something that's already broken. Let's end this amicably." Alex let out a visible breath of relief. A faint smirk touched his lips, just as he had predicted to Mia. Claire was submissive and wouldn't cause any drama. "I'm glad you can look at this so maturely. Claire, it takes a weight off my shoulders. I need some time alone today." Claire continued, "to clear my head and get organized. I'll be working from my home office. Don't worry about me." Sure. Take all the time you need," Alex said with a magnanimous tone, feeling like the wisest man in the world. He finished his coffee, grabbed his briefcase, and walked out the door with a spring in his step, convinced the biggest hurdle had been effortlessly cleared. The moment the sound of Alex's BMW faded down the suburban street, Claire's mask of tranquility vanished. She didn't cry, but her jaw tightened, and her eyes hardened with cold resolve. Instead of going back to bed to weep, she marched purposefully to her home office. That room was her command center, the place where her business was born and raised. Today, it would serve as the headquarters for the most critical operation of her life. She locked the door, something she rarely did. Then, she swung open the painting that hid her wall safe. Inside weren't just her jewelry, but a thick stack of original documents. She spread them out across her white oak desk. The deed to the house, the papers for the co-op apartment she inherited from her parents, the commercial leases for her boutiques, the brokerage account statements, the LLC formation document for Claire's collection, and the financial reports from the last 5 years. She booted up her laptop and opened a fresh spreadsheet, systematically cataloging every asset they owned. She divided them into 3 columns. First column, solely mine. This contained assets she owned prior to the marriage, like the inherited co-op on the Upper West Side and the gold coins her grandfather had left her. These were legally hers, but she knew Alex's sleazy lawyers might try to tie them up in court anyway. Second column, fruits of my labor. This was the longest list. The house they lived in, mortgage paid via her corporate bonuses, the luxury cabin up in the Hudson Valley, purchased under the Claire's Collection LLC, the 3 boutique locations and their inventory, the stock and mutual fund portfolios, now worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, all generated from her business profits. Third column, joint property. Claire almost let out a dark laugh when she looked at this one. There was only one item, a joint checking account whose balance fluctuated based on monthly living expenses, plus 2 cars. Her SUV was paid off in cash. Alex was still making monthly payments on his BMW, staring at the screen. Her anger crystallized. Alex's demand to split everything 50 over 50 felt like highway robbery in broad daylight. Claire reached for her phone. Her thumb hovered over the contact for her company's usual corporate attorney. No, she couldn't use him. Alex knew him. She needed someone new, someone unexpected, someone with a terrifying reputation. She remembered a name a business associate had once mentioned in passing, an attorney known as a wolf in sheep's clothing for his lethal strategies, disguised behind a folksy, polite demeanor. She ran a quick web search. Garrison and Associates. Without hesitating, she dialed the number. Good morning. Garrison and Associates. A receptionist answered. Good morning. I need to speak with Jim Garrison. It's extremely urgent, Claire said, her voice commanding. After a brief hold, a deep, calm voice greeted her. This is Jim Garrison. Mr. Garrison, my name is Claire Vance. I got your name from an associate. I need a private consultation immediately. It's regarding a divorce and aggressive asset protection. Have the divorce papers been filed yet? Jim cut straight to the chase. No, Claire answered quickly, and I want this war to be over before the enemy even realizes it has begun. I don't want to fight in court. There was a pause on the line, as if Jim were silently evaluating his potential new client. I like your approach. Mrs. Vance, can you meet me at my office today around noon? No, Claire replied. I can't risk being seen walking into a high-profile divorce firm. Let's meet somewhere discreet. Another pause. Then Jim's voice returned, this time sounding genuinely impressed. All right, there's a quiet little place called Sunset Cafe near Park Avenue. Meet me there at 1:00. After hanging up, Claire immediately dialed the second critical member of her draft team, her financial advisor and broker, Brenda. Brenda was a pragmatic, no-nonsense woman who had managed a portion of Claire's investments with fierce loyalty for years. Brenda, I your help, Claire said without preamble. I'm divorcing Alex. A brief silence. I'm so sorry. Claire, how can I help? Brenda's tone shifted instantly from friendly to tactical. I need to liquidate some positions immediately, but gradually enough so it doesn't trigger any massive tax flags or draw attention. And I need you to open a new brokerage account and a new checking account at a completely different bank, entirely decoupled from my current profiles. Total secrecy is non-negotiable. Understood, Brenda said. Email me the list of equities you want dumped first. I'll prep the DocuSigns for the new accounts. We'll go entirely paperless, so nothing gets mailed to your house. Thanks, Brenda. I owe you. Don't worry about it. Just look at it as a large-scale portfolio restructuring, Brenda said, trying to lighten the mood. Ending the call, Claire felt a surge of strength. The gears were turning. Now it was time to take the first tangible step toward taking her life back. She logged into her online banking portal and opened the joint account. The balance showed about $4,500. Most of it had automatically deposited 3 days ago as quarterly dividends from one of her investments. Alex clearly didn't know or care where the money came from. He just knew it was there. Claire clicked on the transfer menu and entered the routing number for her business account. In the amount field, she typed $35,000 in the memo line. She wrote, vendor payment, autumn silk collection. It was a perfectly logical business expense that could be backed up by a dummy invoice she could generate in 5 minutes. Her finger hovered over the submit button. Her heart raced. This was the point of no return, the first overt act of hiding assets. A flicker of fear passed through her, immediately swallowed by a massive wave of empowerment. She clicked the mouse. Transaction successful. She closed the laptop, put all the physical documents back into the wall safe and locked it. When she walked out of her office, her face had returned to the same placid mask from the morning. She went to the kitchen, brewed a cup of chamomile tea, and sat by the window, staring out at the manicured lawn. When Alex came home that evening, he found Claire on the couch, reading a novel. Feeling a bit calmer, he asked smoothly, "Yes." Claire replied softly, closing the book. "I'm ready to start the process whenever you are." Alex smiled, thoroughly satisfied with himself. He had no idea the process had already begun at 9:00 a.m., and he wasn't invited to participate. Over the next few weeks, Claire lived a double life with the precision of an Oscar-winning actress. On the surface, she was the heartbroken but stoic wife. She let her shoulders slump. She rarely smiled, and her gaze often looked lost and sorrowful. This performance was incredibly convincing to Alex, whose ego was far too massive to look past what he wanted to see. "So, what kind of paperwork is usually required for this?" Claire asked innocently one night over a silent, awkward dinner, pushing her food around her plate as if she'd lost her appetite. "I don't know anything about how this works." Alex, feeling superior and entirely in control, explained with faux patience. "It's not complicated. My lawyer is drafting everything. The main things we need are our social security numbers, the marriage certificate, and our joint tax returns. Then there will be a settlement agreement. You just have to sign it. The more cooperative you are, the faster this will be over, and we can both move on with our lives." Move on with our lives. Claire repeated the phrase in a soft, pained whisper, as if to herself. Inside, she was scoffing. Of course, Alex wanted it done fast. The faster it went, the less time Claire would have to seek legal counsel or figure out a way to ruin his plans. "I just want this over peacefully," Claire added, letting a few calculated tears pool in her eyes. "I don't want to fight." "Of course we won't fight." Alex reached over and patted the back of Claire's hand, a gesture of comfort that felt violently insulting. "I'll make sure everything goes smoothly." Behind that mask of submission, Claire was moving silently, rapidly, and efficiently. The meeting with Jim Garrison at the Sunset Cafe had been the strategic turning point. Jim, a man in his late 50s with a paternal vibe and wire-rimmed glasses, didn't look like a wolf at all. He spoke softly and listened to Claire's entire story without interrupting. The situation is quite clear. Mrs. Vance, Jim said once she finished. The key element here is time, until the divorce petition is officially filed with the court and served. The assets in your name are legally yours to manage, including selling or transferring them. We aren't doing anything illegal. We are simply restructuring the ownership of your personal portfolio. His strategy was simple but brilliant. The first phase targeted the most liquid assets that had the least direct tie to Alex, the investments. The next day, Claire was driving to one of her Manhattan boutiques. Through the car's Bluetooth, she was on the phone with Brenda. Her voice was sharp and professional, contrasting with the adrenaline thumping in her chest. Brenda, let's start with the tech stocks. Dump 50% of the Apex Tech shares. Claire ordered. Got it. I'll execute the trades gradually over the next 3 days to get the best average price. The cash will sweep directly into the new Stealth brokerage account. Brenda confirmed. Good. What about the municipal bonds? Those are easier. Settlement takes about 2 business days. I can initiate the liquidation today if you want. Do it, Claire said firmly. As she stopped at a red light, an NYPD cruiser pulled up in the lane next to her. The officer inside glanced in her direction. Claire's heart skipped a beat. An irrational spike of panic hit her. She felt like a criminal pulling off a heist, even though she was technically just protecting what was rightfully hers. She took a deep breath and forced herself to relax. The light turned green and she drove on, leaving the patrol car behind. The moment was a stark reminder of the risks she was taking and how vital it was to keep her composure. At home, she had to be hypervigilant. Alex was increasingly distracted by his secret plans with Mia, so he didn't pay attention to details. But there were close calls that left Claire breathless. One evening, Alex came home early and found a stack of mail on the entryway console. He started flipping through it. Claire, didn't your Amex statement come this month? He asked offhandedly while ripping open his own credit card bill. Claire's heart stopped. She had switched all her financial accounts to paperless billing a month ago. Oh, yeah. She called back from the kitchen, bringing him a glass of sparkling water. I switched everything to email billing. It's just easier and we save paper. Ah, gotcha, Alex muttered, his interest already pivoting back to his own expenses. On another occasion, Alex asked, I logged into the joint account and the balance is pretty low. What did you spend it on? Claire had her answer chambered. I had to put down a heavy deposit for the imported Indian silk for the new bridal collection. I transferred it out as a business expense, so it won't count toward our personal asset division anyway. Don't worry about it. She pulled out her phone and showed him a fabricated vendor confirmation email she had mocked up. Because her explanation touched on logical business operations, it sounded entirely plausible. Alex, who understood absolutely nothing about the logistics of the fashion industry, simply nodded and dropped it. Every successful lie, every secret transaction that went through smoothly, injected her with more confidence. She became an expert at covering her tracks. She used a VPN whenever she accessed her hidden accounts. She communicated with Jim and Brenda exclusively through encrypted messaging apps. She had become a ghost inside her own financial ecosystem. Late one night, Claire sat in her office long after Alex had gone to sleep. On her laptop screen was a spreadsheet titled Project Independence. It tracked every asset she had successfully secured. She had just received confirmation from Brenda that the proceeds from the tech stock liquidation had successfully settled into the hidden bank account. With cold satisfaction, she moved the cursor to the row labeled Apex Tech Shares and typed completed in the status column. She stared at the word for a moment. Every completed she typed was one step further away from a painful past and one step closer to a future she controlled entirely. She closed the laptop. The mask was getting heavy, but the weight lifting off her shoulders felt incredible. She would play the dutiful, heartbroken wife until the curtain dropped for good, and when that moment came, she would be ready to take a bow for the greatest solo performance of her life. After securing the liquid assets, Claire knew the next hurdle was going to be much more complex and dangerous. It was time to move the physical assets. Massive blocks of wealth that couldn't just be wired with a single click. Real estate, her eyes fixed on the crown jewel of this category, the luxury cabin up in the Hudson Valley that they often used for weekend getaways. The property had been purchased 3 years ago, not in their personal names, but as a corporate asset under her company, Claire's Collection, LLC. That and her presa. That fact was both her biggest vulnerability and the key to her entire strategy. Selling the cabin required extreme precision. It wasn't a silent digital trade. It involved title companies, physical deeds, and real estate showings. This was where Jim Garrison's expertise became invaluable. They met again, this time at a bustling, noisy diner during the lunch rush to avoid being overheard. "We're going to execute a legitimate papered sale," Jim explained quietly over the clutter of silverware. "Claire's Collection will sell the cabin. The buyer will be our newly formed holding company, Skyline Investments, LLC. On paper, this new LLC will be 100% owned by your mother." Claire nodded, tracking his logic. "So, the money just moves from my corporate account to a company my mother controls." "Exactly. Technically, the cash leaves the purview of Claire's Collection, meaning it can't be factored into the valuation of your business when the assets are divided. But functionally, it remains entirely under your control via your mother. We'll set the sale price slightly below market value to justify a rapid, all-cash transaction," Jim outlined. The process kicked off immediately. Jim fast-tracked the incorporation of Skyline Investments. Meanwhile, Claire had her most trusted manager, Mr. Reynolds, prepare the listing documents. They had to move at lightning speed. The longer the property was in escrow, the higher the chances Alex might catch wind of it, the scenario Claire feared most. Then, one weekend, Alex approached her in an unusually fantastic mood. "Honey, I have a great idea," he said, using a pet name he hadn't used in months. "Let's go up to the cabin next weekend. I want to bring Mia to show her around. Call it an early preview before everything is finalized." Claire's stomach dropped. The request was not only insanely callous, but it also threatened to blow up her entire operation. Flat out refusing would make him suspicious. "Alex," Claire sighed, rubbing her temples to feign exhaustion. "I really don't want to go up there right now. Too many memories." She paused, then delivered her prepared alibi. "Besides, I actually just put the cabin on the market for a long-term corporate lease. Mr. Reynolds is managing it, and he told me he has some serious prospective tenants going to look at it this week. It's better if we stay out of his way. If we get some passive rental income before the divorce is final, it benefits both of us." Right. The bait worked. At the prospect of generating more cash for his half of the pie, Alex's eyes lit up. "Oh, that's a brilliant idea. You really do have a talent for making money." He complimented her, entirely oblivious to the irony of his words. "Okay, let Reynolds handle it. Tell him to push for top dollar." "Of course, honey," Claire said with a tight smile, but Alex was impulsive. 3 days later, he decided to drive up to the Hudson Valley on a whim without telling Claire. His excuse was wanting to check the condition of the cabin before it was rented, but his real motive was to snap a few photos to brag to Mia. The moment Alex's BMW pulled into the gravel driveway of the cabin, Claire, miles away in Manhattan, felt her heart stop. She had just received a panic text from Mr. Reynolds. "The husband is here. Don't worry, I have it under control." At the cabin, Mr. Reynolds, a loyal middle-aged manager who would walk through fire for Claire, was putting on the performance of a lifetime. By sheer luck, he was currently at the property with a young couple, his own niece and nephew, who were pretending to be the prospective renters. "Good afternoon, sir." Mr. Reynolds greeted politely as Alex swaggered through the front door. Reynolds smoothly introduced himself as the associated leasing agent rather than just Claire's retail manager. "I'm the owner of this house," Alex announced arrogantly, looking around the vaulted living room. "Ah, I understand. Your wife mentioned the property was being listed for lease." "That's right. Make sure you get a good rate," Alex said. "Yes, sir. I'm currently showing it to this lovely couple relocating from Germany." Reynolds lied effortlessly, gesturing to his niece and nephew, who offered polite nods. Alex was thrilled. He wandered around the cabin, picturing himself and Mia lounging by the stone fireplace. He even pulled Reynolds aside to give him direct orders. "Make sure you run comprehensive background checks. This is a premium property. And copy me on the final lease agreement. I need to be in the loop." "Got it. Understood. Sir, I report directly to Mrs. Claire Vance, the CEO of the LLC that owns the property, and I'm sure she will forward all relevant paperwork to you," Reynolds replied diplomatically, subtly reminding Alex, who actually held the deed. Alex frowned slightly at the corporate distinction, but brushed it off. After snapping a few photos of the deck, he left. The second Alex's car disappeared down the mountain road. Reynolds called Claire. "That was a close call, ma'am." Reynolds exhaled, his voice shaking slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. You have no idea how much your help means to me," Claire replied, her hand trembling against her phone. The near disaster acted as a catalyst. 2 days later, the title transfer between Claire's collection and Skyline Investments was signed and notarized by Jim Garrison's people. Hundreds of thousands of dollars from the sale were wired the exact same afternoon. The cash was safe, locked in a corporate account Alex couldn't touch. That night, Claire stared blankly out the window of her penthouse. She had successfully defended another fortress, but the victory tasted like ash. She was systematically dismantling her own empire brick by brick just to save it from the man who was supposed to be her partner. Every step forward in her plan felt like a step away from the beautiful life she thought they were building. But she knew there was no turning back. She had to keep unraveling the yarn of their wealth until not a single thread was left attached to Alex's greed. With the cabin secured, Claire faced her final, most massive obstacle, protecting the crown jewel of her empire, Claire's collection. The company wasn't just a financial asset. It was her life's work, born from endless hustle, creativity, and sacrifice. Letting Alex walk away with half her equity was akin to handing over half her soul. Selling the company wasn't an option. The strategy she formulated with Jim was elegant and deeply complex. They would restructure the equity cap table based on a legally engineered debt obligation. The genius of the plan was that it was anchored in a very real fact. 7 years ago, when Claire opened her very first boutique, her mother had given her some seed money. It wasn't a massive fortune, but it was enough to cover the first commercial lease and initial inventory. At the time, the money was a gift. There was never a repayment contract. Now, that gift was going to be retroactively classified as a convertible corporate loan. Jim meticulously drafted a promissory note backdated 7 years. The document stipulated that Claire's mother had provided the capital as a loan, and if the principal wasn't repaid in cash within 7 years, the debt would automatically convert into a 75% equity stake in Claire's Collection LLC. The paperwork was flawless, aged and formatted to look entirely authentic. "This is operating in a very gray area, Mrs. Vance," Jim warned over a secure line. "But legally, it's incredibly difficult for opposing counsel to challenge. There is documented bank proof of the initial wire transfer from your mother 7 years ago. We will argue that was the loan disbursement. If it goes to court, it's your mother's word against your husband's. And in family business disputes, judges lean heavily on executed written contracts." Clara agreed. She would rather roll the dice in the gray area than serve her life's work to Alex on a silver platter. The next step required Mr. Reynolds. One afternoon, Clara called him into her private office at the flagship boutique. She locked the door and poured a cup of coffee for the man who had been with her since the company was just a single, cramped storefront. Mr. Reynolds, Clara began. Seriously, I'm divorcing my husband. Reynolds looked concerned, but not surprised. Working closely with Clara, he had sensed the marital tension for months. I'm very sorry to hear that, ma'am. Whatever you decide to do, you have my full support. Thank you. That's why I need your help. Clara said, Alex believes he's entitled to half of this company. I will not let that happen. This isn't just about me, Mr. Reynolds. It's about protecting your job and the livelihoods of every employee here. She laid out the plan to trigger the debt-to-equity conversion to her mother. She didn't explicitly state that the contract had just been drafted. She framed it as an old obligation she was finally being forced to honor. Reynolds' loyalty didn't waver. Understood. Boss, what do you need me to do? I need you to audit and adjust our internal financial documents, the balance sheets and profit and loss statements. They all need to reflect a long-standing debt obligation to our original angel investor. We need the paper trail to look absolutely consistent and natural. Clara ordered. For the next week, Clara and Reynolds worked late into the night, scrubbing old ledgers, inserting footnotes regarding the convertible note, and generating the minutes for a phantom board meeting. Only Claire, as majority shareholder, and a few loyal managers who held tiny fractional shares for incentive purposes attended. They approved the conversion unanimously the day the deadline hit. The equity transfer was executed at Jim Garrison's office. Claire's mother, a retired woman with a gentle face but eyes as sharp as her daughter's, signed the legal binders without asking questions. She simply squeezed Claire's hand and said, "Take back what's yours, sweetheart," with the notary stamp. 75% of Claire's collection legally transferred to her mother. Claire would remain CEO and retain total operational control. But on paper, she was now just a minority owner. The true valuation of the company was completely shielded from Alex's legal reach. That evening, after the store had closed, Claire stood alone in her flagship boutique. She ran her fingers over the exquisite fabrics of the evening gowns on display. She had saved her kingdom, but the victory tasted bitter. She felt like a general who had to scorch her own earth just to keep it from the enemy. It was a painful, necessary sacrifice. She caught her reflection in the gilded mirror near the dressing rooms. She looked exhausted, but her eyes burned with an unbreakable resolve. The war wasn't over yet, but her main citadel was now heavily fortified and totally impenetrable. As the weeks ticked by, Alex's arrogant complacency slowly began to crack. Mia, who had initially played the patient mistress, was getting restless. The vision of the lavish, globe-trotting lifestyle Alex had promised was taking too long, and she started taking her frustration out on him. "It's been almost 2 months. When is this going to be finalized?" Mia demanded over the phone, her voice shrill. "I'm sick of waiting around in this cramped apartment. I saw a gorgeous townhouse on the Upper East Side, but prices are climbing every week. Just hold on a little longer, baby," Alex pleaded. "The legal process takes time." Claire said she's gathering all the financial records so we can do a clean 50/50 split. She's cooperating. Mia let out a harsh, sarcastic laugh. "Is she organizing it or is she hiding it? You are too soft. Alex, you need to take control. Check the brokerage accounts. Check her bank balances. She might be draining everything while you sit there. We're going to end up starting from scratch with nothing." Mia's words bruised Alex's ego. Being called soft was an insult he couldn't stomach. Fueled by the seeds of doubt Mia had planted, he decided to do some snooping. Not wanting to look paranoid in front of Claire, he waited until she was in the shower that night. He snuck into her home office, booted up his laptop, and tried to log into their joint Vanguard investment portal, an account he hadn't checked in months. He typed in the username and password he remembered. Login failed. He tried again. Invalid username or password. He clicked the forgot password link hoping it would send a reset code to his phone. Instead, the system prompted, "A recovery link has been sent to the primary account holder's registered email." To his knowledge, that was Claire's private email. A knot of dread formed in his stomach. The next day on his lunch break, he called the brokerage's customer service line. After a tedious identity verification process, he finally got a representative on the phone. "I can't access my account," Alex complained. "Let me look into that for you." "Sir," the rep said. After a moment of keyboard clicking, the rep returned. "According to our logs, the password for this account was changed 2 weeks ago by the primary account holder, Mrs. Claire Vance." Alex's heart hammered against his ribs. "Changed? Why? I don't have access to that information." "Sir, as the secondary account holder, you do not have authorization to initiate a password reset. You will need to contact the primary account holder." Alex hung up, furious and terrified. That night, he gathered the courage to confront Claire. He tried to keep his tone casual, leaning against the kitchen counter. "Hey, Claire, I tried to log into our Vanguard account earlier today just to look at the balances, but I couldn't get in. Looks like the password was changed." Claire, who was reading on the sofa, looked up. Her expression was completely blank. She had been waiting for this exact question. "Oh, that," she said dismissively. "My financial advisor handled that. Since we're going through a divorce, she advised placing a temporary freeze on the portal to guarantee neither of us makes any unauthorized trades before the judge signs off. She said it's standard procedure to protect the assets and keep everything fair and transparent." The explanation was bulletproof. Claire deliberately weaponized the words fair, transparent, and protect, the exact vocabulary Alex had used to pacify her when he first demanded the divorce. The reasoning sounded highly professional, entirely logical, and framed as if it were protecting Alex's interests as much as hers. Alex's suspicions receded slightly, but didn't vanish. "Financial advisor. Since when do you have a financial advisor?" "Since you asked for a divorce," Claire replied flatly, returning her eyes to her book. "I don't know the first thing about divorce finance laws. I needed professional counsel, so I wouldn't make a mistake that could hurt either of us." That shut Alex up. The idea that his weak, financially illiterate wife had sought professional help made perfect sense to him, but the seed of doubt remained. He started noticing the little things. Claire would abruptly end phone calls when he walked into the room. She never left her laptop unattended anymore. She seemed to be leaving the house more frequently, claiming to be meeting with vendors or checking on the boutiques. When she came home, she looked exhausted but incredibly focused. This wasn't passive depression. It was active, calculated maneuvering. One night, Alex woke up to find Claire's side of the bed empty. He walked through the house and found her sitting out on the back patio, staring into the dark suburban night. She wasn't crying. She was just sitting there, her spine rigid, surrounded by an aura of intimidating strength that genuinely frightened him. "Can't sleep?" he asked from the doorway. Claire turned her head. Her eyes caught the pale moonlight. "Just getting some fresh air. I have a lot on my mind." Alex went back to bed alone, his anxiety spiking. Mia's screeching complaints echoed in his ears, blending with the image of a newly mysterious, unreadable Claire. For the first time, he felt a crack in his perfect plan. The flaw in his design was Claire herself. He tried to brush off the feeling as paranoia, but deep down, he knew the calm before the storm was over. Dark clouds were gathering. Time was running out. Every passing day pushed Claire closer to the finish line she had drawn for herself. Alex was speaking with his lawyers daily, now, to finalize the paperwork. Claire knew she had maybe a few days a week at most before the divorce petition was officially filed with the New York Supreme Court, at which point an automatic restraining order would freeze all marital assets. She had to execute the final maneuver. The last target was the joint checking account, their operational household fund. Compared to the hundreds of thousands she had already shielded in equities and real estate, the balance here was relatively small. But for Claire, Emptying it was deeply symbolic. It was the severing of the final financial artery tying her to Alex. She waited until past midnight. Alex's rhythmic snoring from the master bedroom signaled the all clear. She slipped into the office, booted up the laptop, and logged into the bank. The joint balance showed $40. 000. It was a mix of both their salaries from the previous month and some leftover buffer cash. She could have taken every last cent. The temptation whispered in her ear, a vengeful urge to leave the balance at zero and inflict maximum pain. But Claire shook her head. Her goal wasn't blind vengeance. It was calculated justice. Her victory had to be legally clean and strategically flawless. She pulled up the transaction history and did the math. Alex's net salary deposit for the month was roughly $4. 000. Half of the remaining buffer cash was about $1. 000. Total $5. 000. She decided to leave exactly that amount. She would only sweep the funds she could easily prove came from her own salary and corporate draws. She opened the transfer window and routed $35. 000 to her hidden personal account. It cleared in seconds. She stared at the remaining $5. 000 balance. It was enough for Alex to survive for a month or two. Leaving it wasn't an act of mercy. It was a legal shield. By leaving him his exact proportionate share, she made it impossible for him to accuse her to a judge of malicious financial abandonment. It proved she wasn't motivated by greed, but by strict accounting. She closed the laptop. An overwhelming sense of relief washed over her, immediately followed by an unexpected wave of grief. The door was finally, truly closed. There were no more joint finances. There was no more ours. Only mine and his. Her silent war was over. All that was left was the declaration of victory. The next day, Claire packed her not a massive dramatic haul that would tip Alex off, just a single medium-sized away suitcase. She packed her favorite clothes, some irreplaceable personal keepsakes, her laptop, and most importantly, a navy blue leather folder. That folder was her loaded weapon. Inside were the bank statements for her new flush accounts, the notarized bill of sale for the Hudson Valley cabin, the updated LLC operating agreement showing her mother as the 75% owner of Claire's collection, and a legally binding memo from Jim Garrison confirming the legality of every move she had made. The paperwork was pristine. Every page was a bullet in the chamber. She went about her Friday routine, her senses heightened, waiting for the shoe to drop. When Alex got home from work that evening, he walked in with a triumphant bounce in his step. A smug smile plastered his face. In his hand, he carried a very expensive-looking brown leather briefcase. "We're eating in tonight," Alex announced with fake cheerfulness. "I've got something to show you. Consider it a toast to the start of our new separate lives." Claire looked at the briefcase, then nodded slowly. "Let's sit down." Then, her voice was the eerie calm at the absolute center of a hurricane. The final scene was here, and Claire, the director and lead actress, was ready to hit her marks. They sat across from each other at the mahogany dining table. Alex radiated the arrogant energy of a victor, while Claire emanated absolute frost. Alex dramatically placed his leather briefcase on the table and popped the brass latches. "All right, Claire," he began, his tone patronizing, like he was explaining math to a toddler. "My lawyers are the best in the city. The paperwork is flawless. The settlement agreement, the itemized list of all our joint assets, split right down the middle. Everything. All we have to do is sign these in front of a notary tomorrow morning. File them, and it's over. Quick, clean, and painless." He slid a thick stack of papers toward her. "Review it so you feel comfortable. I made sure it's all there. The equity in this house, the cabin in the Hudson Valley, the Vanguard accounts, the cash, the valuation of your company. A clean 50-50 split, just like it's fair." Claire didn't even touch the papers. She let them sit there, a monument to Alex's delusion. Instead, She reached onto the chair next to her and retrieved her navy blue folder. With movements just as deliberate as his, she placed it on the table. I prepared some documents for you to review as well, Claire said, her voice ringing clear as crystal. Alex let out a mocking scoff. What documents? A letter from your therapist? Come on, Claire. This isn't an emotional exercise. It's a legal one. Claire ignored the insult. She opened the blue folder and pulled out the first sheet of paper. It was a printout of the joint checking account, time-stamped from that morning. This is our joint checking account, Claire said, sliding it across the mahogany. The balance is $5. 000, half for you, half for me, just like it's fair, right? Alex's face dropped. His smug smile vanished instantly. What the hell are you talking about? There was over 40 grand in there. Claire pulled out the second sheet, the statement from her stealth account boasting a massive 6-figure balance. Those are my savings, not our savings. Money from my salary, my corporate distributions, and my liquidated investments, safely secured in an account with only my name on it. Alex's eyes bulged out of his head. You can't do that. Watch me, Claire countered, producing the third document. As for the Hudson Valley cabin, you're a bit late. That property wasn't a personal asset. It belonged to the LLC, and as the active CEO of Claire's collection, I made the executive decision to liquidate it last month. Here is the notarized bill of sale. Alex snatched the paper from the table. His eyes scanned the page, seeing Claire's collection LLC listed as the seller and an unknown entity. Skyline Investments LLC listed as the buyer. His hand started to shake. This is impossible. I never gave my consent. Your consent wasn't required. It was a corporate transaction, Claire explained with lethal patience. The cash proceeds went straight into the corporate account, money which, naturally, cannot be carved up as personal marital property. Alex was hyperventilating, his face flushed bright red with a mixture of fury and creeping, paralyzing terror. The company, at the very least. I get half the valuation of your company. We built that together. Did we? Claire arched an eyebrow. She pulled out the final, most devastating document, the updated corporate charter. According to this notarized equity transfer, I am now a minority shareholder in my own company. 75% of the equity belongs to my mother, triggered by a default on the seed capital loan she gave me when I started the business. A debt that conveniently matured right around the time you asked for a divorce. Funny timing, isn't it? Alex stared at the paper. Claire's mother's name was printed in black and white as the majority stakeholder. His legs felt weak. His entire master plan, the Upper East Side townhouse with Mia, the luxury vacations, the early retirement disintegrated before his eyes in less than 5 minutes. This is fraud, Alex screamed, slamming his fist on the table. It's highly illegal. You stole my money. I'll sue you. I will destroy you. For the first time all evening. Claire smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a razor-sharp grin of absolute victory. She stood up from her chair. Sue me. My attorney, Jim Garrison, would absolutely love to humiliate you in court. But before you do, call your expensive lawyers. Ask them if it's illegal for a wife to manage liquid assets legally registered in her own name. Ask them if a CEO is allowed to sell corporate real estate. Ask them if it's illegal to repay a documented debt. Claire paused, letting the silence amplify her words. You told Mia I was weak. You were wrong. My only weakness was letting you underestimate me for so long, believing for 7 years that the man sleeping next to me actually had my back. I've taken back everything that is mine. She turned and walked toward the front hallway where her away suitcase was waiting. Go build your new palace with Mia, but you're going to have to pay for the bricks yourself. Goodbye, Alex. Claire grabbed the handle of her luggage, opened the front door, and walked out into the cool New York night without looking back. The heavy thud of the door, closing behind her, sounded like a judge's gavel. Court was adjourned. The sentence had been passed. Alex stood alone in the massive, suddenly empty house, surrounded by the invisible shrapnel of his blown-up life. The silence Claire left behind was more deafening than his own screaming. For several minutes, he just stared at the table, his useless brown leather briefcase set next to Claire's blue folder, the tombstone of his future. The reality hit him with the force of a freight train. This wasn't a nightmare. It was legally binding reality. Panic overtook him. He grabbed his phone, his fingers trembling so violently he could barely dial his attorney's number. Mr. Davis, Alex shouted the second the call connected, abandoning all pleasantries. My wife screwed me. She moved all the cash. She sold the real estate. She transferred the corporate equity. It's massive fraud. We need to sue her right now. Freeze everything. A heavy sigh echoed through the phone. Calm down, Alex. Walk me through this. When exactly did these transactions occur? I don't know. Sometime in the last few weeks. And our divorce petition. Has it been officially filed with the court yet? The lawyer asked, his tone suddenly sharp. No. I was going to have her sign the papers tomorrow. A long, agonizing silence followed. Alex could feel the dread pooling in his stomach. Mr. Davis, are you there? Alex, the lawyer said, his voice dropping into a flat, clinical register. I need to give you a harsh dose of reality. If all of these transactions were executed before we filed the petition, and those assets were legally in her name or under her LLC's control, what she did is almost certainly 100% legal. Legal, Alex choked out, unable to comprehend it. It's not theft, Alex. It's aggressive personal wealth management. Until a judge signs an injunction or a freeze order, she has the fiduciary right to liquidate or transfer her portfolios. You should have told me to file the damn papers the minute you decided you wanted out. You gave her a massive head start. Legally, she didn't defraud you. She just completely outsmarted you. The phone slipped from Alex's sweaty grip, clattering onto the hardwood floor. Outsmarted you. The words bounced around his skull. Claire, the woman he had written off as submissive and oblivious, had played him like a grand master playing a novice. Then he thought of Mia. He had to tell her, hands still shaking. He picked up the phone and dialed his mistress. Hey, baby. So, how did it go? When are we signing the lease on the townhouse? Mia's voice was bubbly, practically vibrating with greed. Mia, there's a problem, Alex whispered, his throat raw. The money, the properties. Claire took it all. It's gone. Silence on the line. Not a shocked silence, but a cold, calculating one. What do you mean it's gone? Mia asked, her pitch dropping an octave. She moved it. She sold the cabin through her LLC. She signed the business over to her mother. All that's left is a few grand in checking and the equity in this house, which we still owe a massive mortgage on. Alex stammered out. A harsh, ugly laugh burst through the phone speaker. Gone. You let her take everything. Are you a total idiot? I put my life on hold for your promises, and now you're telling me you're broke. I didn't know she was going to do this. You thought she was stupid. Mia cut him off viciously. Turns out the only stupid one here is you. I'm not doing the struggling couple routine. I'm not starting from scratch with a loser. Lose my number. Alex. Click. Just like that. The true love that had been his justification for blowing up his marriage was nothing but a parasite attached to his bank account. Now, he was entirely, utterly alone. Panic morphed into complete despair. He had to reach Claire. He had to beg. He opened his texts and started firing off messages. The first text was pure rage. Claire Vance, you are going to regret this. I won't take this lying down. No response. The second text was a threat. I'm going to tell everyone how psycho you are. I'll ruin your reputation and your business. Still nothing. The third text attempted to negotiate. Okay. I messed up. I'm sorry. Let's just sit down and talk like adults. I'll give you whatever terms you want. Silence. Finally, his ego shattered completely, and he resorted to pathetic begging. Claire, please, don't leave me with nothing. I'm so sorry. Just please answer me. He stared at the screen for an hour, praying for the 3 little typing dots to appear. Desperate, he tried to send one more message, but it immediately flashed green. Message not delivered. He tried to call her. It went straight to voicemail. She had blocked him. That realization was the kill shot. What broke Alex wasn't the screaming or the insults. It was Claire's absolute silence. That silence was his life sentence. He wasn't even worth a response anymore. Alex collapsed onto the sofa in the dark living room. The grand suburban house, once a monument to his perceived success, now felt like a mausoleum. He was surrounded by expensive furniture and hollow memories. The wreckage of his own arrogance was scattered all around him, and he was the sole survivor trapped in the ruins, swallowed by agonizing, delayed regret. 1 year passed. Time, which had once felt like an agonizingly slow enemy during those anxious weeks, had proven to be a powerful ally for healing. 1 year was enough time to watch a world burn down, and exactly enough time to build a brand new one from the ashes. In a stunning penthouse overlooking the glittering skyline of Manhattan, Claire began her morning. The crisp air blowing in from the terrace carried the kinetic energy of the city and the smell of fresh starts. She had long since moved out of the suburban house and its bitter ghosts. She had relocated physically, mentally, and emotionally. Her aesthetic had evolved. 2. Her hair was cut into a sharp, modern bob that framed her face, a face that now radiated unapologetic confidence. Her wardrobe had upgraded from upscale retail to bespoke power suits and runway exclusive evening wear. She was no longer just the owner of a local boutique chain. She was a rising titan in the international fashion industry. That morning, she had just wrapped up a Zoom call with her executive team. Claire's collection, which she had formally bought back from her mother using her newly secured personal wealth, was in the middle of a massive global expansion. They were finalizing the logistics for their first overseas flagship store in Milan. Everything is tracking perfectly. CEO Vance, Mr. Reynolds reported, his face beaming through the laptop screen. The logistics partners are locked in, and the visual team signed off on the interior design. We are exactly on schedule. Excellent work, Mr. Reynolds, Claire said, a genuine smile lighting up her face. Thank you for pushing so hard on this. I couldn't have done it without you and the team. Closing the laptop, Claire walked over to her sleek espresso machine and pulled a dark, rich shot. Sipping the coffee, she looked out at the Empire State Building. The divorce had been legally finalized 6 months ago through a desperate bargain bin lawyer. Alex had tried to countersue for fraud and embezzlement, but Jim Garrison's team swatted the allegations out of the air like flies. The paper trail was bulletproof. The judge ruled that Claire's transactions were legal asset management executed prior to the court's jurisdiction. In the end, Alex walked away with exactly what Claire had left him on the dining room table. The judge approved the 50-50 split of the current marital estate, meaning Alex got half of the $5,000 left in checking and the privilege of paying the massive mortgage on the suburban house all by himself. Claire occasionally thought of him, but the phantom pain was gone. The memory was like watching a grainy movie about someone else's life. She had learned that Alex's betrayal wasn't a reflection of her inadequacy, but a symptom of his own fragile ego. The trauma had acted as fertilizer for her ambition, forcing her to evolve into a version of herself she had never dared to imagine. She at peace. She was whole. And above all, she was free, across the river, in a cramped, poorly lit studio apartment in Queens. Alex was living his new reality. He had been forced to sell the suburban house at a loss because he couldn't afford the mortgage. After paying off the bank and the real estate fees, he walked away with pennies. He was now working at a mid-tier logistics startup, making a fraction of his former salary. That night, he sat alone on a thrift store sofa, the only light in the room coming from the harsh glow of his smartphone. He was mindlessly scrolling through social media, a toxic habit that had sparked his downfall and now served as his daily torture. His thumb froze over a post from a major business publication. It was a photo from the women in Enterprise Awards Gala, standing center stage, wearing a breathtaking burgundy gown and holding a crystal trophy with a blinding, joyous smile, was Claire. Alex stared at the photo until his eyes burned. The woman on the screen looked like a stranger, not just because of the designer clothes, but because of the sheer magnitude of power and happiness she projected. This was a Claire he had never met, or, more accurately, a Claire he had actively refused to see. At that moment, the final, most devastating realization crushed the breath out of his lungs. He realized that the greatest treasure he had lost wasn't the bank accounts or the real estate. He had thrown away a partner who possessed the brilliance to build an empire, the resilience to weather a hurricane, and the fierce loyalty to stand by his side. Every trait he had written off as a weakness, her patience, her integrity, her quiet grace, had actually been the bedrock of her immense strength. He had tossed a flawless diamond into the trash because he was mesmerized by the cheap sparkle of a piece of glass named Mia. Ah, Mia. The last time Alex saw her was also through the lens of social media, posing on a yacht in Miami, draped over the arm of a much older, much wealthier man. The cycle continued, and Alex was nothing but collateral damage of his own profound stupidity. The regret ate at his stomach like battery acid. It wasn't just grief over lost luxury. It was a soul-crushing mourning for his own foolishness, his arrogance, and his absolute failure as a man. He locked his phone screen, and the darkness of the studio apartment swallowed him whole. The only asset he had left to his name was a lifetime supply of regret. Back in the Manhattan penthouse, Claire set her espresso cup down on the marble counter. She looked at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window. Behind her was the warm, elegant interior of her sanctuary. In front of her stretched a glittering metropolis teeming with endless possibilities. She no longer looked back. The past was a masterclass, not a prison cell. With a quiet, unshakable smile, she turned away from the glass, ready to face the day and ready to conquer the world. The dawn had arrived, and the sun belonged entirely to her.